be successful in this role, you have to be good with people. You have to be able to communicate with people. You have to be able to build relationships. Because if you don't have trust, if you don't have buy-in, then whatever initiative you're trying to push, whatever change you're trying to make isn't going to stick. Being able to help them fix and make their lives, their day-to-day activities a little bit easier within the hospital, that's really what drives me.
Today, I will be interviewing Lauren Davis to learn more about what it's like to work as a COO. Lauren, welcome. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. We're super excited to have you. So, we're going to go ahead and jump right in and get started. 3 questions that we always like to start off with are, in your own words, what do you do? Where do you live? And then, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Okay, I live in Harlingen, Texas, and I'm the chief operating officer for a hospital in Brownsville, Texas. And I run the day-to-day operations. So all of the ancillary departments, when you look at EBS, food and nutrition, security, facilities management, respiratory therapy, lab, pharmacy, I'm over cath lab too. So making sure that we are running smoothly within those departments, and then also work on the growth agenda. So I partner a lot with my CEO, so our chief executive officer, to determine where we need to focus, what strategies we need to focus on, and specific service lines that we either need to grow or that we need to bring into the community. And when I was younger, I actually wanted to be a physician. I went to UTSA and got my bachelor's in biology. I scribed in the ER for about 2 years in a handful of hospitals within San Antonio, and decided that that was just not for me. I don't like the clinical aspect of it. I just can't stomach it. And when I determined that, I needed to pivot and go in a different direction. I knew I wanted to be in healthcare, but I didn't want to be directly at the bedside. And I had a family member that was in hospital administration and decided to go that route. I luckily, Trinity, which is a really good school that has the Master's in Healthcare Administration, is in San Antonio. And so I applied and I thought, okay, well, if I get in, I get in. If not, then I'll just figure out what I'm going to do with my life.
Right. I love that. That's awesome. So, how long have you been working in this field, kind of in total?
I've been working in this field for 9 years. I started in 2015 as an administrative resident and then held various roles, went through HCA's executive development program, and then applied for this role, which is my first COO role.
Awesome. And then, what kind of made you want to get started into the hospital administration career path, or how did you get your start?
Well, I knew of it. I know now it's becoming a little bit more popular. Before, unless you really knew somebody that was doing it, you really didn't know about the field. So I did have a family member that worked in hospital administration, which piqued my interest. And as I was scribing, when I was in the emergency room, even though I was working within the same system at different hospitals, but it was the same system, I identified that there were a lot of differences between the procedures. There wasn't much standardization, and there were a lot of things that could be fixed that could be a little bit more efficient for the patient that I felt that I could probably help in that aspect. So that's really what started piquing my interest in the field.
Got it. Are there certain degrees or kind of like certifications that one is needed to get this job? Are they required, or is it kind of an optional route?
No, so you do have to have specific degrees. So typically you can have a master's in healthcare administration, master's in business administration, and it really just depends on the route that you want to go. So I went a very traditional route. I went master's in healthcare administration, went through a 1-year residency program, and then worked my way up to this role. With other people, they've gotten master's degrees in a different field, but they started in a different role. So, for example, you'll see people that started in supply chain or started as a director of a department and then worked their way up and then got their master's and decided that they wanted to go into this field. But you do
Got
have
it.
to have a master's to get into this, to be in this role.
Okay, got it. Are there any other job titles that this job goes by, or is it specifically usually just COO, Chief Operating Officer?
Usually just chief operating officer. There are different roles that you typically hold before you get into this role. So for example, you have an assistant administrator, which is usually right out of school. VP of operations or associate COOs are usually pipeline positions that get you into this role. There's also director of operations, which is another pipeline role.
Okay, noted. So now moving on to kind of like your specific day-to-day job and activities, what does a day in the life look like as a COO? So we can kind of go with like your start time, your clock in, your clock out. What
Mhm.
percent of the time do you spend, by yourself or in collaborative meetings? What does a typical day look like for you?
That's what I love about this job. It's different every single day. So typically we'll start, I mean, it really just depends on what's going on in the hospital. So I'll say very basic day, usually around 8, 5:30, and then it depends if we have board meetings or MEC events. We have those after hours. If we have weekend events, then you have the weekend events, right? If you're trying
Right.
to go and touch base with the night shift, they work 7 to 7, so you're usually going in and rounding at about 9:30 is when we typically try to do our events. But there's a lot of extras that you have to do. So on top of my daily duties, I'm also a part of 2 boards. And so that time spent as well when it comes to the board meetings, when it comes to retreats that we have to participate in. But
Right.
I would say I probably spend, I would say about 80% of my day with others, whether it's
Okay.
in a group meeting, whether it is a one-on-one meeting, but really spending time with people within the hospital.
Right. A lot of collaborative work, a lot of outside work, I'm sure, outside of your office. And what are the specific tasks that you spend the majority of your day doing?
Right now, it is on service line development. So it really depends on where you are within the position. So I've been here for about 3.5 years. When I first started, there was a lot of focus on the operational side of what I do. And when I say that, it's spending time within the department, making sure that I'm learning the frontline staff, making sure that I'm learning the leaders and I'm learning what they do on a day to day. Now, I can't get into the weeds as much as a director would, but I'm there for a resource. So if I am here to help remove barriers for my directors, for the frontline staff, then I have to have a good understanding of what they're going through, and I need to
Right.
build that personal relationship with them. So when I first started, I spent probably about a good 2.5 years of doing that, setting the foundation to make sure that we have smooth running departments. Now, you're always going to run into issues and fires here and there, but if you have high performing leaders, then they're typically able to navigate through those, and then they will escalate when they need help. For the last
Got it.
year and a half, I've really been focusing on programmatic development. So identifying what needs are in the community, identifying what patient population that we're able to take care of, what we're not able to take care of, and how can I bridge that gap. And what, from a physician standpoint, from an employee standpoint, resource standpoint, how can I bring all of those together and get from not having a service to being able to provide part of that service to, at the end goal, being able to provide that full service line. So one of the service lines that I'm working on right now is neuroendovascular. Previously, we are primary stroke, so we were able to offer the primary services that you need, but we did not have the physicians, we didn't have the equipment to provide that neuroendovascular neuro IR service line. So I've been working to develop that program so that we're able to treat those patients within our community and aren't having to transfer those patients out of the hospital.
Got it. That sounds like a bunch of different multitasking, kind of wearing
It,
different
it
hats.
is.
You're doing different things. No
Yes, you
specific task.
definitely do a lot of different things. My sister came to shadow me because at one point she was interested in doing it. She was here for 2 days. And she told me, she said, you do a lot of random stuff. I was like, yes, it is. It's a lot of random stuff. And she was like, I don't know how you know so much about so many things, but it's just because of experience. It's getting involved
Right.
in all of these different things. So you get to learn more about different things. And a lot of this job too is the ethics and compliance piece. So typically, especially in our company, typically if you are the chief operating officer, you're also the ethics and compliance officer. So
Okay.
all of the quarterly facility ethics and compliance committee meetings, I lead any sort of ethics line calls that are submitted. They come through me, so I have to do an investigation, or if there's just somebody within the organization that doesn't feel comfortable, they don't feel like something's right, then they know that I have an open door policy, so they can either call the hotline anonymously, or they can come talk to me, and then I'm doing that investigation and reporting back.
Wow. So kind of just like a big puzzle, the hospital being the puzzle, and you're kind of just putting all these pieces together.
Yeah,
That's kind of
yeah.
like what it seems like. Do you use any specific tools or technologies on the job on a day-to-day basis?
We have texting, right? Because you're having to keep in constant communication.
Right.
Email, people email all the time. I try to keep up with it as quickly as I can, but usually I'm texting. We have WebEx, our WebEx Teams platform. That's a big thing. I have a group. All of my directors are in one group. So if I have a message to send them, I just send it through there so I know who's getting it and who's reading it. And
Okay.
then from the business side, HCA has a lot of different platforms that we're able to get data from. A big one is Power BI, so we're able to do a lot of deep dives into really any information that we're looking for, and drill down by our facility to see how we're ranking, what we're doing when you compare it to other HCA hospitals. And then from a market
Right.
share standpoint, we're able to pull all of that data as well.
Okay, so kind of like certain different ones, but I would say that your majority of the time is spent kind of on phone communication, texting, calling, emailing, all through a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
So now moving on to kind of learn a little bit more about your personal experience with this job. What parts of the job are the most exciting to you?
For me, it's fixing things. So I love to get to know people and just build those relationships. And then by doing that and building the trust, I'm able to work with the directors, work with the staff to identify barriers that they have and what needs to be fixed. And so utilizing either corporate or division resources or community resources, being able to help them fix and make their lives, their day-to-day activities a little bit easier within the hospital, that's really what drives me, making sure that our employees are engaged and are able to do the job to the best of their abilities.
Right. And then on the flip side of all of that, what parts of the job are either emotionally draining, challenging? I doubt that it can ever get boring in healthcare, but even kind of a boring patch, what does that look like to
Mhm.
you?
I think when it comes to, I wouldn't say that I'm ever bored here, because there's always something going on. But when you do have when you have those high performing directors that are able to take care of what they need to take care of, they're able to kind of navigate situations on themselves and run smoothly, then it definitely makes my day to day a little bit lighter because they're high performing people, so they're able to manage their situations effectively.
Right. Kind of moving on, are you able to leave kind of your work at the office, or is it something that you have to sometimes take home?
No, it's I try to leave it at the office, but it's definitely something that you take home. I mean, whether it is you're always on call. So we have an actual on call list, and we have weeks where we're the administrator on call and we're the person
Okay.
that the ER is calling. If there's any situation that needs to be escalated, then the AOC is that person. But besides that, I mean, you have to be available really. I don't want to say 24/7, but you have to be available the majority of the time.
The majority of the day. So kind of going off of that, as a COO, are you able to work flexible hours or kind of like in a remote or hybrid setting, or is it more common to work in office set hours?
It's more common to work in hospital. I mean, there are flexible hours, right? There are things that you need to do and there are things that you need to get done at a certain time. So you need to make sure that you're getting your work done. You can work remotely here and there, but I will tell you, to effectively do this job, you're not able to fully work remote. I've had to work remotely for a few days at a time, and you definitely start to feel like you're missing a piece
Right.
of what you're doing.
Right, because most of your work is surrounded by people and it has so much to do with the performance of people in the hospital. So you kind of have to be in that
Yeah,
in-person setting.
yeah, and you have to know what's going on in the hospital, and people will update you if you're working remotely if it is a situation that needs to be escalated, but just the kind of day-to-day things that are happening that just kind of filter through you on accident, you're not getting those updates. And so you kind of feel a little bit removed and like you're not able to do your job as effectively as you would want to.
Exactly. Are there any busy seasons in this profession? Like, is there a certain part of the year that you see the busiest, or is it just kind of a constant flow throughout the whole year?
There used to be, when I first started, you would see the winter season at a peak. And now I feel like it's busy season all the time. You do have a lot more like intubations and bronchs and everything when you do have the winter seasons because it's cold and flu season, right?
Right.
But I would say as of right now, and that's probably post COVID that we've seen that really it's just busy all the time.
Right. I was going to ask, why do you think that kind of changed or kind of had a flip and transformation during those certain years? Do you think it has anything to do with kind of like after COVID, after pandemic?
I think people are just a little bit more conscientious about what's going on with them. Previously, people probably waited till the last minute to go to the hospital, and they would get really sick in the winter. Versus now, if something comes up, then they're more conscientious about their health, so they're coming to their hospital. The area that we're in, we have a lot of patients that don't have primary care physicians, so they utilize the emergency room or urgent care center as a primary care.
Wow, interesting. Okay, that's good to know. What do you feel that people underestimate about this profession?
I think I don't really think people know kind of what goes on behind the scenes. Like people go to a hospital and they're here and then they leave, and I don't, unless you know about, or it's either been exposed or your school offers the healthcare administration program, I don't think people really know that there's a whole team of people that are managing the operations of the hospital. And then
Right.
really
Kind
like with our CEO, focusing on how we're going to grow and how we're going to make sure that
mhm.
we're providing to our community.
Right, because there's kind of two parts to it. It's what's going on inside the hospital and then outside. within the inside as
Mhm.
well. So I'm
Yep,
sure that not
yep.
a lot of people know about what happens behind the scenes, like you were saying.
Mhm.
Now, what do you feel that people overestimate about this profession? So this can be an overhyped idea where you're like, that's not necessarily true, something that people kind of have positive assumptions, very negative assumptions. What's something that you see people typically overestimate?
I think people probably overestimate. Let me see. That's a good question. I think coming in, and we do our best to make sure that everything is standardized and everything is um, scheduled. And for example, with the outpatient setting, we have patients that we've scheduled. We have patients that are coming in for certain exams, whether it's pre-admit testing or whether it's for an ultrasound or a mammo or an x-ray. And people think that they can just come in, right, without an appointment and then be seen right away, and that it's going to be a super fast process. But
Mhm.
that's the part that I think people overestimate, because we're like any other business, we're when it comes to employees and productivity, we're having to manage that. We're having to manage the throughput of everything, and we do our best to see patients, to see those walk-ins. But sometimes it's a little bit of a wait, and I think people expect to come in and they say, okay, I'm here, it's 2 o'clock, I'm going to have my lab drawn even though I don't have an appointment, and I'm going to leave. But there are a lot of people that are scheduled, so working people in, it takes a little bit longer to get those walk-ins through. So I think that's what people overestimate. So I will say, if people are coming into a hospital for any sort of outpatient treatment, get an appointment, because it truly does streamline the process. It makes it faster for them, and then it makes it faster for everybody else as well.
Right. That's such a good perspective that I'm sure not too many people are aware about, because that's something that you learn once you're in the hospital, you're on the front line, whether you're working clinical or administrative setting. Not many people get to really see that side of it all. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
really good point. What is the fastest way to get into this profession, especially if someone kind of has a non-traditional background, they're thinking of going into a career path like this? What do you feel is the fastest way to get to where you are?
I would say, from a non-traditional standpoint, getting experience within the hospital. So if you are already like a manager, director, taking on different projects and getting experience not only in whatever you're doing right now, but in other departments as well, and communicate that you're interested in growing, and make sure that you are part of an organization that invests in development. I've been, like I said, with HCA for 9 years, and I have to say that this company is invested in developing their staff, whether it is the frontline staff, managers, directors, or senior leaders. Even at my level, I've gone through the executive development program, but they still offer executive sessions, executive courses that you can be a part of to continue to grow within your field. So one, make sure that you're communicating that you want to grow. Two, make sure that you are taking on and getting all the experience that you can. And three, that you're in an organization that it will invest in your development and growth.
Right, exactly. Kind of to expand on that idea of like growth and development and coming from different fields, what fields do you typically see people that are in this position? Where do they usually come from? Is it a healthcare field? Is there ever some that are outside of healthcare and they want to work their way up to COO? Do you have any insight on that?
Usually I've seen health related. And so whether that it's a speech therapist or a respiratory therapist or somebody in supply chain that has voiced and has spent time getting the education that's required and developing, I've seen it's usually with somebody that's within the healthcare field already.
Okay, that kind
Yeah.
of makes sense, just because they already kind of know like the background of all of this and the knowledge that they need to have in order to be successful in a role like yours. What does somebody have to be really good at or enjoy doing to be good at this job?
I would say to be successful in this role, you have to be good with people. You have to be able to communicate with people. You have to be able to build relationships. Because if you don't have trust, if you don't have buy-in, then whatever initiative you're trying to push, whatever change you're trying to make isn't going to stick. It's not going to be hardwired because you're not going to have that buy-in.
Right, that's so good. And then how long does it usually take for somebody to be successful at this role? Is it a certain amount of time or is it kind of just overall experience?
I think both. So overall experience, I'm continuing to learn every day something
Right.
new in this role. From a new being in a new hospital, I would say probably about 2.5 years to really get to know the ins and outs of your hospital and to get really to start to build the trust with the staff.
Interesting. As a COO, is there a promotion path? And if so, what does it look like?
Yeah, so the COO role is typically a pipeline position. So when you're in the COO role, the majority of the time you're wanting to get to that CEO role. And so sometimes people are in COO roles for 10, 15 years. Sometimes people are in COO roles for 7 years. But usually it's a pipeline position for that chief executive officer role.
Got it. So it's kind of just kind of like a path on the way to that overall goal.
It is. And I would say it's better to have experience at other hospitals and other hospitals that are different sizes as well.
Right. Do you ever see people that are kind of staying in the position as COO and don't end up getting to CEO, or is it kind of just it's always going to be a pipeline?
Within our company, because I think it's different for every company, but
Got
within
it.
our company, usually you do not see people that are lifetime COOs. Usually, I mean, it'll be a person that's a COO and then they move into that CEO role. But again, that's specific to our company. I think it's different. The expectation is different with different companies.
Interesting. So now whenever it comes to salary, what is a typical salary for somebody at your level? You can provide a range, even if it's broad, because I know that sometimes it varies from location to location, but kind of like a broad range, what would you give
Honestly,
us?
it really just depends. It depends
Mm,
on your experience. It depends on what market you're in. It depends on the size of the facility. There are a lot of variants, so I really wouldn't be able to give you a specific range just
mhm.
because there's so many variables within that salary that you have
Right.
to take into consideration.
Right, that's very true. And whenever people in your field kind of like move on from COO, you kind of mentioned this before, but they usually go into the CEO route. Are there ever people who kind of just back off and go back into something in healthcare, like whether that's clinical, or do they usually stay in the administrative side of it all?
No, I've seen, and especially in the director manager roles, people will go into the leadership role and then maybe it's not for them or they have different things going on, but sometimes they'll take a step back and move into the clinical field. I haven't
Interesting.
seen anybody in this role go back to what they were doing before. We have seen people that will leave the company and they'll go be like a COO or CEO somewhere else. But I usually see that more with director manager roles. I think because when you transition, there's a bigger difference transitioning into the manager director role because it's hourly versus salary versus director manager to this because all of it's a salaried position.
Okay,
So
got it. That's good to
you're
know.
not going to get like overtime and you're not going to get all of the different incentives that some of the frontline staff are accustomed to.
Right, something that's just a little bit more set, more in the book. This is what it is. Interesting. Are there any books or resources or programs that you recommend to somebody wanting to get their start in this profession?
I would say the Crucial Conversations book, because a lot of what I do, you have to have tough conversations, whether it is performance-based or whether it is dealing with just one-off situation that happened. You have to be able to give tough feedback. You have to be able to have those crucial conversations. It takes time to develop those skills, but I would say a good place to start is going through that Crucial Conversations course. And then it's part of, I think it's the same platform, the same author, but it's that influencer book as well. So they talk about how you can be an influencer, how you can influence people, and then on the flip side, how you have tough conversations. So being able to do both of those things is going to be very important for somebody that wants to be successful in this role.
Exactly. And you said that was called the Crucial Conversations book?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm sure our audience would love to take advantage of that. You have shared such wonderful advice and amazing insight into your role as a COO. So, just to kind of wrap up this conversation, what is something that you would tell your younger self who is just getting started in this career?
I would say take a step back
Mhm.
and get to know people first to create that buy-in. That's one thing that I learned maybe about 2 years into my career is you can't make changes, you can't um, hardwire things without having buy-in from somebody. And to have buy-in, you have to have a relationship with those people, and you have to have their trust.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Miss Davis, for being with us today and for giving us a small time of your crazy, crazy schedule and day. We really appreciate it. You shared amazing advice and a lot of insight, and I'm sure our audience members can learn so much from your episode today.
Well, thank you so much.
You just got one episode closer to learning about the world of jobs out there. To explore the rest of our career categories and find your best fit, go to jobdictionary.com to sign up for the beta users waitlist. Then subscribe here to find the next episodes coming out this week. And as always, drop us a comment, review, or message to let us know how we can better attune our episodes to your specific needs. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, Threads, Pinterest, and wherever else you're on socials to go get our short, snappy preview reels that expose you to new job options every day. Because here at Job Dictionary, we believe your big aha moment can be just one scroll away. Go check it out and get out there. Cheers!